Hey, what's up guys? The following footage you're about to watch was filmed a couple years ago in the old garage. Some of the audio and video isn't quite the best, but I wanted to release this video anyways because I think it might be helpful for some of you guys at home who are taking on these projects yourself. If you have any questions or things aren't clear because of the video, feel free to leave your comments and questions below. I'll do my best to help you out, and I hope that you find this informative. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your project.
Test
Recording.
fire. Did you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
You gotta throw better. Back up. Miata valve seal installation. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to another episode of the GQM Garage Show. Tonight we're going to be doing valve seal replacements on my 1991 Mazda Miata. This is a little bit different of a method for changing the valve seals. I'm going to actually do this without removing the head. Little backstory, when I had this motor apart and I was putting it back together after I refreshed everything, I replaced the valve seals because I had a little residual oil in the back of the valve stems. I decided to go with SuperTech branded valve stem seals. They were awfully cheap, almost a little bit too cheap. I think they were like $18 ship if I remember correctly. Ever since I put the motor back together, I started seeing a lot of blue smoke on long decels and getting back on the gas, having the car sit at idle and giving it gas to get it going. I'll see smoke, and it even burns oil now on the dipsticks. So I don't know if I just installed something wrong or if I just am unlucky and I had a bad batch, but I've done valve seals on several other cars, including my NB Miata several times, as well as my S2000, which I used OEM replacement seals, and I've never had an issue with smoking afterwards. So this time around, I'm changing them out and I'm using OEM seals. One thing I do want to note, and this may have something to do with the reasons why I'm having smoking issues. So when I was looking up the part numbers for the 1.6 liter Miata valve stem seals, the OEM part numbers are the same for the intake and the exhaust. The SuperTechs, as well as any 94 and up Miata, they have a different part number for intake and exhaust. So that may have something to do with it. A lot of the companies who are selling the SuperTech seals are advertising them that they fit all 90 to 2005 Miatas. But even when you get them and you look at the labels that are on the bags, they're like for a Toyota Land Cruiser or some other vehicle that's not a Miata, just probably has the same size valve stem seal. So for any of you that have taken the valve cover off and have looked at the head of a Miata engine, the reason why most people wait to change the seals when they have the head off is because of the castings for the camshafts. These castings, they're part of what supports the cams in place, are the reason why you can't use traditional valve spring compressor tools on a Miata head. So what I typically do when I have the heads off and I'm putting them back together, I just use a big C-clamp here, and I tape the bottom side that's going to touch on the combustion bowl area / mating surface area, and I use a socket that I cut a window into to compress the retainer assembly and allow me to remove the valve keepers and reinstall them with a pair of tweezers. So having the castings is a real pain because it does get in the way when you're trying to work in there, and that's why I cut such a big hole in the socket. Anything small on a traditional valve seal that will, say, mount to the castings on the head, the window's not big enough to really get in there with tweezers or anything to get them lined up nice. So this method, I picked up these tools from Summit Racing, and I've not used them before. I've seen vague descriptions of people using them, but it seems that they work out, so I'm going to give it a try. The other reason why I don't want to remove the head on this stupid car is because the turbo kit is god awful, biggest pain in the ass to remove. Like I'd rather eat like probably white dog poop than take this thing on and off because it's just miserable. It's so tight in there, and the bolts with the bigger downpipe on that Greddy kit is just a nightmare. So I really don't want to pull the whole head and everything else off and turn it into a whole weekend project. the way this tool works is you have, this is the installer. You order it from Summit, it gives you it supports 2 different sizes of valve stems, valve stem diameters. So from my understanding is this is magnetic on the inside of the tool, and you use it, so you have it lined up inside your where your valve spring and retainer assembly are. You give it a good whack, which will break the keepers loose, and the magnets will grab the keepers as you compress the retainer assembly and allow the keepers to come free. When you go to reinstall, you put the tool together like this. You have the keepers lined up inside the retainer, ready to go. The bevel right here goes in between them. This is spring loaded. You have it on your assembly, you give it a good whack to come down, and the spring will push the retainers into place, and as the assembly comes back up, it locks. Now, it's a pretty crude way of doing it, and I'm really, again, like, I'm not all for it. I'm gonna give it a try and see how it goes. If it doesn't work out how I anticipate it's gonna work out, I'm just gonna pull the head, which again, I don't really wanna do, but we'll see how it goes. So this is interesting. I've never done this method before, so I figured this would be a good thing. If this works, this will make valve seal replacement a lot easier for the people in general, which I know it's a common issue on higher mileage Miatas. So we'll go through all the steps along the way. And for anybody who's not done this before, you should already have the knowledge to do a timing belt installation, and this is a good time if you need to do timing belt, water pump, front cam seal, front cam seals, front crank seal. Get all that stuff out of the way, because you're basically going to be removing the whole timing belt assembly, all the front covers. It's like you're doing a timing belt install, and you're going to have to retime the engine anyway. So if you haven't done that stuff and it's due, it's a good idea to plan everything all at once. So I've already taken all the exterior stuff off. I'm going to start this installation by removing the cam holders. You want to loosen them in increments from the front going to the back, because the cam comes out on an angle as you torque them down, and we'll go from there. So we'll get to the next step in a few minutes. Alright, so as you guys just watched, you saw me removing the cams. Note that when you're removing the cam holders, they're marked for the direction that they have to face and what order they're supposed to go in, so as you put them back in, make sure you keep that order the same. Once you have everything out, I've already took it upon myself to remove the spark plugs. So, 2 things. We have to keep the valve supported. We have 2 options to do this. You can either do the good old-fashioned rope trick, which is what I'm going to do, or you have the option of using an air compressor with an attachment to pressurize the cylinder with air to hold your valves up. Because as soon as you undo the keepers, the valves are going to want to drop down into the cylinder. And if that happens, then you're shit out of luck. You got to pull the head and do all the work anyway. So I didn't want to use an air compressor. 1, because sometimes I do lose power in this place, so that would be unfortunate. 2, if you don't have the greatest seal, if you have a little bit of carbon built up on your valve stems and you're leaking a little bit, it may not take much pressure to cause the valve to drop. So doing the good old-fashioned rope trick, you drop the cylinder down, you load it up with a nylon rope, and you raise the cylinder up, so you have a nice constant pressure up against the valves while they're seated. So this will prevent any possibility of them dropping down. You don't have to listen to a compressor constantly going off, and you could just kind of take your sweet ass time doing what you got to do. So This is applicable for all 90 to 2005 Miatas. The 90 to 97 are obviously hydraulic lifters. These lifters take a magnet. You could just grab them right out of their place. There's no shims or anything to worry about with these cars on the 99 and up. If they're stocked, they have the quarter-sized shims on top of the solid lifters, so you'll pull the quarter-sized shim off, and then you can magnet out the lifter. And just keep them in order. Make note of what order you take them out on, so you put everything back the way it has to go. So as I get to the next step, we're lowering the rope into the cylinder. We'll pick up from there. So, have the cams removed, have all my lifters gone. Here's what I want to show you guys. First of all, here's the cam casting I was talking about that make this a little bit unconventional for trying to get at the lifter and spring assemblies with a traditional valve tool. So, looking into the casting here, I'm going to highlight a couple things. Here's the tip of the valve stem, the center in the middle. The half moon pieces on the sides right here, these are the valve keepers, or valve locks as people refer them to. There's a notch in the end of the valve stem right here that these grab into. And then this is the retainer, which holds the whole assembly together, as well as the spring, which is right below it, the valve spring. So I forced all my rope as much as I could in the cylinder with the cylinder dropped all the way down. I then, once I couldn't put any more rope in, I raised the cylinder, and you could feel it binding up. I put a good amount of pressure there because you don't want this coming loose. You want there to be a good amount of pressure. You want a rope that is not that soft and squishy, but you don't want a rope that's going to flake and leave a bunch of shit inside your cylinder. So a nice quality nylon rope seems to be the best bet for that. And now that we have everything up, I can begin working on cylinder. The first cylinder here, and we'll start taking everything apart. So we'll try the tool out, see how it goes, and then we'll go from there. So I have the new valve tool. This is the magnetic end right here. Now keep in mind, the valve springs are pretty stiff, even in stock form. They require a good amount of force to compress. So I'm going to be using my little sister's mallet, even though I don't have a little sister, but we'll call it her mallet. Something with a good amount of weight. You're going to have to give it a decent whack to compress the spring enough so the magnet can do its job and pull the keepers out. And we'll try it like so. Let me position myself here, nice and lined up. And look at that, it actually took the retainer, the whole assembly off. I'll get you a close-up of this. You can see the valve locks in there. Nicey nice. And then, we'll keep recording. We're going to use our magnet and pull our valve spring out, like so. And it shouldn't move, but there is a seat on the bottom that the valve spring sits in. Typically that will stay in there. You do have to take it, well, we'll take it off just for the sake of it, but here's the ring down at the bottom. And now we can get at our valve stem seal. The valve is still in place, which is good, so the rope is doing its job. And I'll get my valve stem seal puller, and we'll yank it out. So here's my valve stem seal removal tool. It's not the best quality piece. A lot of these you can get from Harbor Freight or eBay. But what you're gonna do is, we're gonna work it down and be careful of the valve, just because we don't want to put any excess pressure on it that we don't have to. get your pliers around the valve stem seal itself, give it some clamping force, and we're going to wiggle it back and forth and pull it off. And there's an old valve stem seal. So that's what it looks like. Next step, we'll take one of the new OE seals and we'll use an installer tool to slide it on. Alright, so I have my new valve stem seal here. I put oil on it just to get it well lubricated so it has as little resistance as possible while going down the valve stem itself. So I'm going to get it started by hand, hopefully, and not drop it down. Okay, it's on the tip of the stem seal there. I have a valve stem seal installer here that will wrap around the seal. Actually, I could show you this with the old one. So all this is going to do is it's going to allow you to push the stem seal down without putting any pressure on the valve stem itself. So got the new one started. Just going to go down nice and gentle, as straight as possible. So when you get down to the bottom, where it first stops, make sure that you're in line as straight as you can be. And you're gonna put some pressure. You're gonna feel it kind of seat on there. It's gonna almost like suction on. And that's it. Okay, so I want to give you guys a close-up of how the assembly is gonna go back together. Here's the spring base that I was talking about before. Pretend this is the head and the valve stem coming up through the middle of it. This is going to go around the base, wrapping around, or with the valve stem in the center of it, followed by your valve spring. You're going to take your valve retainer. The male side is going to go penetrate through the top of the valve spring, and then your valve keeper locks. You can see them in the camera. Notice how they're smaller on one end versus the other end. The smaller end is what's going to face down towards the head, where the larger end is going to be up on the top. So you're going to have your two halves, and the tip of the, like I said before, the tip of the valve stem will come up through the retainer here. So you're going to have your halves loaded and ready. Sorry, I got oil on my hands here. It's very slippery. So, with the valve stem here, as you compress the spring, these two halves are going to separate and come apart. When they do, the tool, which is spring loaded and has a beveled head right here, is going to put pressure and push these down. So this is going to be loaded and ready to go, and as you hammer this and this comes down, it's going to put constant pressure on the locks. So as soon as the spring compresses, separates the valve locks around the valve stem with the valve stem in the middle, the spring will push them down into place, and as the spring comes back up, it's going to wrap them around and lock them in place around the valve stem. When you're doing this and you're using a traditional valve tool, you'll have the pressure steady and constant, so you could take your time and use tweezers to align these nice and get them in the center, and then you can lower it slowly and make sure that they lock into place. Again, this is a bit of a rough method, but it is saving us a lot of time and a lot of hassle. Okay, so like I said, I put my valve spring base in first, followed by my valve spring. This is now wrapped around the tip of the valve stem. I have the keepers already in the retainer, and I'm going to try to be as gingerly as possible here, resting this down. Actually, maybe I should use a magnet so I don't drop it. Again, be very, very, very careful while doing this, because if you drop these, you're going to have a hell of a time finding the keepers, because they're so small. So we're going to put this down, sucking out the lock. Okay, so now our assembly is loaded. I'm going to try the tool. I'm nervous. Get it centered. Almost. You gotta go down a little bit harder. Oh, I actually freaking locked them. I'll do one more time just in case. Hammer this one more time. I'm just gonna try to straighten these out. Dude, it fucking worked. I mean, it looks a little bit sloppy in there because I'm like real anal when I put these back and I try to get them like perfectly split.
I'll just turn off.
There you go. I think that's good.
Well, you're gonna do a test one anyway on beef. Put these in there.
I don't care. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So the tool works. Again, it's a little bit crude putting these back in here like this. You can see the gap is not even from one side to the other. I'm real anal and I like it when I can take my time when I have the head off. I try to split the gap as evenly as possible. But you'll notice ones that I haven't taken out, the gap is uneven on other sides, so they do kind of move around a little bit and lock into place. But I whacked it a couple times again and compressed the spring, and it stayed in there. So the tool does work. This will definitely save everybody a lot of time if you need to do a quick valve steel. If you need to do a quick valve steel change and you don't want to pull your head off. But we'll go through the rest of the engine and I'll talk you guys through the reassembly. So one thing I want to point out real quick, because I am just super anal and skeptical of stuff like this, I whacked it again, gave it a good whack with the tool, and it actually centered the keepers a little bit better. So it looks like using that tool, you can still get them nice and centered. I want to make sure that I compress the valve spring a good amount to show that the keepers are in place just for my own peace of mind, and make sure that they're not going to come out as soon as you fire the engine up, because you drop a valve while the engine's running, that's piston, the valve interference and stuff's going to get bent and chewed up, and you really don't want to take that chance. You want to make sure that you have everything in place. flashing my eye. Fuck. Alright, so there you have it. We replaced all of our valve seals successfully. No valves were dropped during the making of this, thank goodness. Definitely saved us a great deal of time. Didn't have to remove the head and change them the good old-fashioned way. The rope trick did just as intended. It kept everything held up while I was able to take my time and go in there and change everything. So a couple things to know as you're reassembling. Make sure you lubricate thoroughly all the lifters and spring components. You want to have good lubrication for your first startup. Put your cams back in, put your cam caps on, torque them in sequence to the 10 foot-pounds, and while you have your covers and everything off, change any oil seals that you need to, retime your engine, put your covers back on, and fire her up. So I hope that this was informative. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the section below. I'll do my best to answer it. Till next time.